And giddy up. Here we go.
Bang.
We're off.
Episode 189, Pete. 189.
Not bad. Here
190 comes tomorrow, my friends.
Yeah, and we're in the second half. We got a lot of things going on. I'll tell you what, it was hard today to figure out what for, right, John? I mean, literally, we were looking across at all these various stocks, and it's like, all right, what are we going to talk about? Which is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you've got Tesla getting a $90 upgrade on the price list, but we talk about Tesla every day, so we figured, well, maybe we'll give it a break for a day. But,
we still got EVs, though.
We still got EVs. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Folks, welcome to the Rebel's Edge. He is Pete Najarian. I'm John Najarian, and Jared is handling all the dancing bears, which are back on the screen, I'm sure. Surfing, kicking, whatever. And all of the sound effects that you'll hear like that. We thank you for tuning in, and we're going to dive right into Macro Minute. Yeah. And the Macro Minute today is, okay, Pete, how much can we put what the Fed is about to do, the mistake they're about to make, in my opinion, the 26th of July, how long before the market basically shrugs it off and goes, it's just another quarter point. We're not going to have to worry about it.
Well, they may have already done that, John. We've already kind of baked that. I mean, last week we kind of baked a lot of that in. I think that from a macro minute perspective, for me, it comes down to a couple of things, really. Looking ahead at CPI, PPI, and earnings season, which really kicks off towards the end of the week as we get into Thursday, Friday. We're going to get into that earnings season, and I think everybody's always, anticipating, all right, the banks kick it off. How are the banks doing? And then we start moving on. And I think a lot of focus is down that road right now and just a couple of days from now. Yeah,
well, the issues will be, like you say, Pete, how strong are the earnings now as well, which do kick off with Pepsi and Delta on Thursday. It's not the banks. Banks kick off on Friday. So just as Pete said, that'll be something that's one of the weaker sectors, in fact, Pete. The weakest was energy, down 9% in the first half of the year, followed by healthcare, I think, at 5%. And the financials are down 2% in the first half of the year. And that's after some of those regionals being down 60, 80, 90%, and some of them going out at zero.
Out.
All right. Time for Fantastic Futures.
Nice.
I'm going to say, Pete, that those treasuries that you were just talking about, stabilizing, but people are talking about longer or higher for longer. And that's one of the reasons I say it's a mistake. But that's a mistake they're going to make, is my belief.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying the digestion process of these markets is absolutely incredible at times. I mean, it really is. So I would agree with you on that, John. I talk about the 10-year all the time. The fact that the second you get over 4, that becomes an issue. People seem to want to, sort of say, you know what, forget this risk. I'm going to here, and I'm going to start being in the treasuries. That all being said, for me today, Fantastic Futures really goes around with crude oil over 74, and take a look at nat gas, which was up close to 4% today. Those energy names are starting to move to the upside, and after all that bad performance in the first half, maybe energy is ready to be the next one to start really leading as we get into the second half of the year.
Very possible. I would bet on it. In fact, I think we were up as high as $74 for WTI crude oil today, Pete.
Yep.
So pulled back from there, but nonetheless up. All right, let's talk about IEP. This is Carl Icahn Enterprises. And we know that the short seller, Hindenburg, was all over this one, Pete. I want you to also be aware that we were all over it in terms of call activity in this one, because they did come in and buy a ton of calls. And not too long ago, as you see there on your screen, they've bought calls and they've bought puts, I must say, Pete. But with the stock down there at whatever, $23 or whatever, they really came for the calls. And those calls have just kept moving to the upside. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Carl Icahn, he's had to do a little bit of dancing, John. At 85 years old, the guy actually does the two-step pretty well because he's been dancing around this thing for quite a while. You had the Hindenburg guys coming after him. How about this? On May 1st, the stock was 50. On May 4th, the stock was 30. On May 25th, the stock was 21. So you get an idea of what this path has looked like since Hindenburg sort of basically highlighted what's going on here. Year to date, the stock was down 43% coming into today. So yes, it's having a bit of a comeback. It's up 13, 15, 17%, whatever that number might be, trading around $34 a share. It is still way down for the year, John, and they've got their issues. They've got those loans, and that will be something that might hang around for a little while. This is a nice start today, but can this continue for this particular name, IEP? I'm not sure if it is, John, because I look at some of those loan numbers and those numbers look kind of ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah, when he personally takes out $3 billion plus, Pete, yeah. That is somewhat concerning.
Let's see. What do you do with that at 85? I mean, you and I were talking about this before we started, but 85 years old or whatever he is, he's somewhere in that range. But okay, tax reasons, really? At 85, you're still worried about it? The whole thing is very complex to say the least.
Yes, it is. Well, how about this one? Speaking of complex, Pete, Helen of Troy, HELE, started off just 5% higher and just kept climbing and climbing and climbing for good reason, though. Look at these numbers here, Pete. They posted quarterly earnings of $1.94. That was nearly a 20% upside surprise for Helen of Troy. And there aren't a lot of these that have been doing that. I mean, when you're talking about, the sorts of things that they put out, some of their competitors have had a much tougher time. Apparently, people traded down to the not as big a brand, but still the same sort of help that they needed or thought that they needed for their cosmetics.
Well, and the interesting thing here, John, is this. How about if I told you, well, their numbers are down year over year. They're down a lot, but the numbers that they're having to go over, they're going over the top of those numbers every single quarter after quarter, 4 in a row now where they've beat the expectations, and they absolutely have hammered it. So for whatever reason, the analysts and everybody else, they've got numbers out there that are extremely low, and these guys are definitely crushing it. Now, at what point in time do we have to start saying, well, they're really moving really well. The stock's not that far from the highs. But this is a stock, John, you want to talk about a short squeeze? How about 25 to 35% short interest here? So there's a lot of things going on. I'm talking about the fact that they've got that reduced number that they're crushing on the earnings. And you start looking at those shorts, boy, that makes up for something really big. When you crush it the way they did and people start reaching, those shorts start getting awfully nervous, and they should be nervous right now as the stock has absolutely ripped to the upside today.
Yeah, and it's not the same. I understand it's not Sephora or anything like that, but it is health and wellness and all of that kind of stuff. So, they make these, water bottles, Pete, as well. Those EXO water bottles or whatever the heck it is you see in gyms all the time. So apparently their diversification is really helping them, whereas places like Sephora are really just on the makeup side and hair dryers, things like that. But anyway, I think it's their diversification over at Helen of Troy that's really helped them.
Yeah.
Now we get back to another stock, Pete, Rivian, that is unbelievable in terms of how well the guys at Market Rebellion did at flagging in quotes, the unusual activity. Well, because they came after them. They bought these calls, Rivian calls, aggressively. And the stock was in the teens, Pete. It went running to the upside. And take a look at where Rivian is today, folks. I think a 97-cent call went to over $7. So I'm not saying people did that the whole way, held on the whole way. What you and I do, of course, is we roll up, because we're buying something closer to the money. But if somebody bought an out of the money call for 98 cents, it's a great day for them today.
Yep, having an unbelievable day. And John, when you just look at this stock, the fact that it's doubled since the end of June, I mean, we're talking about here we are today, it's July 10th. So at the end of June, let's call it the 21st. We'll go that far. The 21st of June, it's more than doubled. I mean, that gives you a little bit of an idea of the kind of move that we're talking about here. The output, the deliveries, those were really accelerating over the last quarter. In Q2, that looked fantastic. So there's a lot of things to be very excited about. I would caution people that suddenly say, well, this Rivian might be who needs Tesla? Well, I will say this, Tesla, they're producing 34 cars to every one car or vehicle that we're seeing from Rivian, John. So they are different animals. They're not necessarily, obviously both EVs, of course, but you know what? Tesla's still doing pretty well with what they're doing. And you look at Rivian, I think there's a lot of different names out there in the EV space, most of them Chinese names, that are starting to catch up a little bit, but they're still a long ways from where Tesla is as far as production, the money they're making, and all the things that are going into it. And that's why Elon generally has a smile almost every day of his life, I'd say.
And folks, if you want an opportunity to follow those same trades that Pete and I just detailed in Rivian, you could go to marketrebellion.com/bang. That's marketrebellion.com/bang. And you get a BOGO. You buy 1 month, you get 1 month free. There really isn't a better deal out there, folks. You get to follow those smart analysts that we have, analyzing that data that virtually nobody else sees. And all of a sudden, you have a 98 cent option. So if you bought 10 of those, it was a $980 investment. You could have turned that into $7,000. So think of that, because that's the kind of trades, that's the kind of leverage you get with options. And you can get that by going to marketrebellion.com/bang. And get that buy 1 month, get 1 month free. All right. Carvana, Pete.
Yeah.
We had the Manheim report today, which is basically how well did autos do in terms of being sold off of lots. And not surprisingly, at least not surprising to me, Pete, EVs are exploding in popularity. Tesla still has 3 of the top 10 EVs. And they're right at the top of the charts, really. Not all 3 at the top, but Hyundai actually has really been moving up pretty well, Pete. Nowhere near the same numbers, folks. It's not hundreds of thousands per quarter like Tesla. But nonetheless, that's good for a place like Carvana, Pete, because Carvana came out and said, hey, Tesla Model 3, #1 seller with us. Can't keep them on the lots. And they're probably going and doing what Carvana does best, delivering these cars to people that want them like that, just with a text or something on their app.
Well, and I'll tell you this, John, they have had an absolute massive move. Whatever time frame you want to look at right now for Carvana, you go back to December, for instance, stock was $5. It's up 500% since then. That's a pretty impressive move to the upside. And why is that? Well, we talk about these short squeezes, guys. We bring these names up all the time, and oftentimes we will see call buying in a lot of these various names. And why are they doing that? You'd say, well, but there's all these shorts. Why would they do that? Because when the shorts feel it and they start to feel that squeeze, those calls doesn't mean they always will, but those calls all of a sudden start to get something, a little bit of mojo to them to the upside. And that's exactly the kind of thing we have seen for Carvana now for a while. 68% short interest. So when we're talking about some of these names, we talk about the shorts and that squeeze that you can get. That's exactly what I think we're seeing here. Are the numbers good? Yeah, they're turning over some great numbers. So there's a positive working right now for Carvana, because those shorts, they're getting hammered, and those guys are having to chase this thing back up to the upside. And the fact that their business is starting to pick up and they're starting to show some of what everybody was hopefully wanting to see. And you brought up the EVs. That's where they've become king. Everybody seems to want to have these EVs, John. And what they're doing with Tesla right now has been absolutely outstanding. The sales volumes themselves have been rising, and they're rising on the back of the EV space right now. So really, really impressive what's going on. And don't be one of those guys who jumps in front of this steamroller, because that's not the way you want to play this stock right now based on what we're seeing and how it's trading at this point.
Yeah, it's been a richly rewarding year for people that first they traded the puts and made a bunch of money on the drop, Pete. And then after it started rebounding, they have just been pouring in on the upside and buying upside calls and rolling to the upside.
Yeah.
All right, let's let you take it to your friend and mine, Pete, Mr. Pat Fitzgerald, the coach of Northwestern that finds himself in a little hot water.
Boy, I think that hot water is starting to really boil, John. I mean, this is a really unfortunate situation because there's one of two scenarios here, right? One, he knew about the hazing that was going on, and it sounds, if you can believe, now, we don't have all the information. We just have what writers are writing about it, and some of the guys who say, well, I'll talk to you if you don't give me my name out there and all that kind of thing and whatever. But, you know, Pat has done an amazing job as the coach at Northwestern. Let's just say that. I mean, because I have always given him credit because I know how difficult it is to recruit to Northwestern and all the rest of it that we talk about all the time. And he, every few years, has a team that really is unbelievable. And this past year, the team itself wasn't as great, but he put a lot of guys into the NFL. So he's doing a lot of things right. Here's the place where he might not be, is this hazing issue, John. And like I say, if he knew about it, kind of shame on him, I'd say. If he didn't know about it, shame on him for not knowing about it, because this has really turned into something. I mean, it started off with, hey, you're in the middle of summer, we're going to give you 2 weeks off without pay, which doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people. It is a couple $100,000 though, because the guy's making well over $5.5 million a year. So that was hitting him a little bit, but you know, it's not the middle of the season, none of that kind of thing. It's starting to bubble up a little bit more, John, and we're hearing more about this whole thing. I'll give you one real quickie, and I don't know where you stand for sure on this. I think I do, but I was a captain at the University of Minnesota, and I was made captain my second year, my sophomore year. I was a three-year guy. I was the first guy who stepped up and said, you know what? It is so difficult to get into college, to be there at camp, to be 18 years old, to have all the pressure on you about being this football player who wants to be a part of the team and all the rest of that. Let's not put anything more on them. Let's not do this hazing. Let's do the right thing. Let's let these guys get here and get acclimated, right? That was my philosophy. So I eliminated all of that as the captain. I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just the way I felt because I was uncomfortable as a freshman. I didn't want to go through any hazing and all the crap that these guys think is so funny. Well, I'll tell you what, it's unfortunate if Pat is a part of this thing and has looked the other way though, John, because you know what? This especially some of the stuff that's quote unquote sexual in nature as well. Not comfortable, not right, shouldn't ever happen, ever, in my opinion. I'm just not a believer in that whole hazing world. I was never a part of a fraternity. I know you weren't either, but it's just not in my nature. That is not that I'm not proving to anybody who I am by crawling naked down the hallway and having some guy hit me. I mean, that stuff to me is pretty ridiculous. What do you think though? Because you're kind of, you know, you're in the heart of it there in Chicago. Or at least you were the other day. I know you're traveling John's the traveling man. He could be in New York right now, Puerto Rico, Miami, San Francisco, Chicago, whatever. But I know you pick up the paper and you probably hear it on the radio there. So what is the chatter in Chicago right now?
Well, the chatter was, as of 24 hours ago anyway, Pete, that they thought they might have unfairly penalized Fitzgerald. Because they said that the allegations were not that he knew. But as you say, a lot of people have subsequently come out and said, well, but if he didn't know and none of his assistant coaches knew, how the hell was this going on under their nose? Because if it was under their nose, do they really have control of these guys? And hopefully just a few bad apples there. It was a crappy year last year for Northwestern football. They had one of their worst seasons in his tenure there. I think it was their worst season. That doesn't mean that you got to let crap like this go on. I agree with you 100%. And I've always liked him as a guy, Pete. But as you say, the buck does have to stop somewhere. Sometimes in politics, the buck doesn't stop anywhere. But with head football coaches, with all of the money that they're paid, the millions of dollars that they're paid, it goes beyond just trying to get W's on Saturday. It's got to be, are these young men attending class? Are they good citizens and all the rest? And some of this stuff is pretty bad, even just to read about it. And you hope that they can get to the bottom of this and get rid of some of those kids, because this was not coaches doing this, at least from what I've read, Pete. These were, underclassmen on underclassmen, just to, prove that you're just a lowly freshman and I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, I would never throw Pat under until we get to the bottom of this, because I think he has done a magnificent job as a former player there and as a coach there, John. He's done an unbelievable job, I think, and he's been there a long time. But if you hear some guys say, well, there was a whiteboard and it had a list of guys on there, and that list was, they called it the Shrek list or whatever. I mean, I don't understand any of it. That's not something in my world at all. But some guys say there was no whiteboard. What is this guy talking about? So there's a lot of things to kind of unpack before they actually know the real story there, John. But it would be very unfortunate if a lot of this that they're talking about is the truth. All right, we're going to have something a little more fun. How about a small NBA and then a little bit of Major League Baseball, because we've gotten to the midway point for baseball, right? We've got the All-Star game and all of that, but I wanted to talk about the number one pick in the NBA draft. He looked pretty damn good last night, John. I mean, he played one game already. This is just summer league. They're playing in Las Vegas. They're doing their thing. But last night he had 27 points. He had 12 rebounds. He had 3 blocks. And we're talking about a guy who's somewhere around the 7'3", 7'4" area. He weighs about 225 pounds, which is extremely skinny for a guy that height. But he is starting to look like the guy that everybody said. In game one, he looked nervous. He didn't look like the guy, which makes total sense. But in this second game, the guy kind of stepped up to the plate and looks like a guy who might be what he was, told to everybody. He is this elite guy who's got the hype that he can back up, because the little bit I watched, John, the guy he moves around with the ball so well for his height. It's scary. I mean, it truly is. There were times where he almost looked like a guard, the way he handled the ball, the way he was doing what he was doing on the court. All that being said, he's going to need to gain some weight, though, because there's some guys in there that are going to be banging around on him, and that's going to be a little bit of a different story for him. But so we'll start with that one. What do you think? Do you think the kid showed a little something, like maybe he isn't just some French kid? He's actually an NBA baller?
He is an NBA baller, Pete. He does need that weight. You and I both talked about it, and he won't get through the season if he doesn't put on, 25 to 40 pounds, because the pounding that these guys take is pretty incredible. And the leaning in, when you're down there in the lane playing defense, which he played so well, with those blocked shots and all the rest. He's got guys leaning on him, as they're trying to move into the hoop, he's given up an awful lot of weight. So I would say that he looks an awful lot to me, Pete, like a skinnier version of Kevin Garnett.
Yeah.
Who's likewise almost 7 feet. They list him at 7 in the programs. Supposedly he's 6'11", but this kid's 7'3".
Yeah.
So, taller, moves well, like you say, is a ball handler, not just a shot blocker, and scored 27 points last night. And you don't do that on all slam dunks. So,
no.
He can shoot the ball from the outside. There's no doubt.
And he's 19 years old, so we don't know if this guy might end up being 7'4", 7'5". I mean, really, it's not unusual to keep on growing. And you put him with Garnett, I would say the same. I'd almost say a Ralph Sampson or something like that, as far as just his structure. And he does need to gain some weight. Lastly, and then we'll jump off, but lastly, how about we got the All-Star game, right? Not only do we have the All-Star game, no one knows this, but believe it or not, there was a Major League Baseball draft recently. It ain't the NFL draft, John. People don't know who these guys are because it could be years. They might go off somewhere. They could go to the minors. They could go somewhere else, blah, 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 blah. But they did have a draft. You know who the first two guys were taken? Two guys from LSU. LSU had a pretty damn good baseball team last year, and they were the kings of the draft. They had plenty of guys. We got the home run derby tonight, John. That ought to be pretty fun. And then you got the All-Star game, which means we are at the middle. We are at the half point now for Major League Baseball. And I think we're starting to really see exactly who's who in the pew right now, which is kind of fun. Tampa, still there. Atlanta, unbelievable. I mean, those guys are incredible to watch. Ohtani had maybe the greatest month in the history of Major League Baseball as a pitcher and a hitter and all the things that he does. So I think Major League Baseball right now is really at a very exciting point, and we'll see how the fans like watching some of the home run derby. I'm not a big guy for the All-Star game, but I kind of like the derby. How about you?
Well, Pete Alonso, is the odds-on favorite according to Caesars.
Yep.
He is, you bet 100, you could win 300 if he wins the home run derby.
Wow.
But you know what I'm going to say. I would love it if Ohtani was in the home run derby.
That would be awesome.
And I guarantee you, Julio Rodriguez and some of these other studs in there, like Guerrero and Alonso, since, of course, Aaron Judge isn't there this year, they would all be shaking in their boots that a pitcher might win the home run derby. But he could. I know that that's not going to happen this year, but I would love it if he could.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, when Guerrero gets up to the plate, I don't know if it's his dad or him. They look identical. I mean, their swing is the same, body type is the same. Those guys that's really, really cool. They got great genes in that family because they've been doing this for a long time.
Very true. Well, folks, we welcome you to another week as we get a little deeper into the first quarter of the second half of the year. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and I'd encourage you to share this with your friends. Check out marketrebellion.com/bang for that BOGO we spoke of, and we'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern Time.